Now then, sir, it's been a while, but we're doing another 6 factions, 6 decks. So there hasn't been huge changes in this last patch. There's been a couple of cards that have been tweaked and things like that, but any decks you were running last season, you can pretty much run now. Maybe you have to change a provision or, you swap a couple of cards out, but really no archetype's been buffed to the point of it being incredible or any strong archetype being killed. So in terms of that kind of stuff, you can already run the stuff from before. This season, I've got a whole load of stuff. Last couple of days, I've just been head's been wearing with ideas, so we've got a lot of different things today. If you've never watched any of my 6 factions, 6 decks videos, these are sort of things I'm going to be using this season to try and get up in pro rank, and these are kind of ideas for people for decks and things like that. They're not. This isn't like a meta snapshot of okay, these are the best decks for each faction, anything like that. So take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, it's there as a guide. I would encourage you to try out the lists and make changes, and I'll make it clear which ones. But some are in the process of me improving. They're not the final most optimal list. So yeah, just keep that in mind. And I'll kind of have a different section for each of the lists, for each of the factions, and I'll timestamp it and everything like that. So if you're sorted for a faction and you just want a scoia'tael deck or something, that'll be linked and everything. So as always, if you would like to see more content, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe. It massively helps me out, and I'll get started because there's a few to get through. Okay, so the first list is monsters. Let me just pull it up. This list is the one I used in my last video. It's a non-diversion list with Unseen Elder and Oriana and Dettlaff and all that kind of stuff. And the reason we got non-diversion is because of the anti-synergy between Elder and Oriana, and I kind of found it's better without diversion, mainly because with diversion, Unseen Elder's ticking away your bleeding so fast, and you really want it to be sticking around for Oriana, so we've lent more into that, the more sticking bleeding on every unit on the board rather than trying to get our value through as soon as possible. So it's definitely more engine focused. It works a lot like the old style of vampires used to, and I've been really enjoying this, to be honest. The list I'm showing is slightly different to the one I was using in the video, just because I've played a few games since then and we've made a couple of changes. So those changes being we've got Whisper's Tribute in there just to help with a bit of consistency, and we just switched up a few things. But this is definitely a fun one. I would recommend giving this one a try. I've been having a lot of fun with it, and it got a buff in the last patch. So Queen of the Night is 1 provision cheaper, and Garcane's got 2 points extra. So they stick a lot better, I've found, in that before they could be killed on deploy if there was bleeding with bombs, like any 4 damage would take it off, but now 5, it's a bit more of a requirement. You're going to need a boiling oil, Owl's Thunder, something of that kind of tier to remove it, and then it's trading up in provisions, a 5 being used to take out 4, so those changes definitely helped. And I would say if you do want to try this list, I would definitely check out the last video. The list was very similar, operates much the same, just so you can see how it operates really. But I really like this list. Anyone who's watched my stuff for a while knows I like the vampire archetype, and I feel like it's pretty much cracked here. There's not a huge lot in the way of improvements I'd really make here with the list. I've been tweaking it a little bit. I think if you were looking for the strongest monsters list right now, you're probably looking at Arachas Swarm or Keltulis, but vampires are definitely a contender, especially with this build. There's a lot of different ways you could build this, but I think this is the right way to go with vampires. So yeah, if you enjoy vampires, definitely try the non-diversion route. I really think it works, to be honest. So next up we have Nilfgaard. So not a huge lot you can do with Nilfgaard at the moment. Really, you're either running something with Ball, something like the Meta Breaker list, running like the Cancerella and all that kind of nonsense, or you're running Cloggers. But this is the direction I've decided to go. I'm trying out a spies kind of archetype. It's very similar to lists people have been running before. Um, how close it is, I don't actually know, because I just kind of built this, and I would imagine most people kind of came up with the same idea. If you're thinking about building a spies list, once you've got your usurper, ball, Emir, your Brathens, that top end's already in. You're going to want to run Imperial Enforcers, Aristos, Informant, things like that. At that point, the list is pretty much sorted, so there's not much in the way of wiggle room. I think the leader ability definitely is something you can sort of make the choice on and change your mind about, and try out different things for. I've personally gone for double cross just because you get the largest amount of provisions. And with us running, we're running 6 cards that are 10 provisions or more. That more or less maxed out provision cap is really, really nice. If you try and run it in, something like imposter or imprisonment, you're sacrificing a couple of provisions, and that means you're sacrificing some of the power of the cards. And with the list being not too flexible, I think you need every provision you can get. But the general idea with the list is you're synergizing with spies. You're using your Imperial Forces, getting each spy is basically playing for an extra point for every enforcer on the board, as with seditious aristos, and you can kind of combo everything like that very nicely. You've also got an experimental remedy in there, as once you've got informants or emissaries into your opponent's deck, which is just naturally going to happen in the first couple of rounds, it basically operates as another informant, for example. And it feels really nice. I think there's probably wiggle room, and I think, as I say, the more tried and tested lists will probably get you more wins. But I've definitely enjoyed this. It's a lot more satisfying, I think is the best way to put it. You kind of clog up your opponent's side, you're getting lots of value, getting lots of tall units and lots of pings. It feels really fun. So I'd say give this one a try as well. It's a nice change. It's a nice change while still being familiar if you're used to kind of playing a control style Nilfgaard deck, so it's not won't take you long to pick up at all. So for Northern Realms, I saw a comment on one of my videos recently from Kamikaze, who I've seen a couple of times, and he asked if I could do something with siege engines. And I'm a big fan of Siege, so I was more than happy to try something out. And this is kind of what I came up with. We're going very control heavy, and it kind of steals some ideas from traditional kind of shield wall lists, but we're using Siege as our top end rather than the sort of bronze consistency that you get with like Varaxis and things like that. So we have a lot of the very, very solid cards, and I think a lot of this was quite natural to put into the list. So we've got the double jewelers, we have an Adalia to spawn in extra units, which really nice if we end up in a bit of a rough situation with Siege where we've used a lot of Siege engines. If you're stuck with a Siege engine in hand, you haven't got 2 to activate Siege. Adalia is like a pseudo Siege engine because she's going to spawn you another one. So it can get you out of some tight spots. And a lot of the stuff is really sort of complementing around that. So we've got Donomir because there are going to be matchups, as you would expect, where there's going to be heat waves, and Donomir being able to protect, something like Selkirk, if we can activate him with siege support. If we use Amphibious Assault to get a 12-point Kedweni Knight down, we don't really want that being touched by poisons, hard removal, that kind of stuff. And I haven't had much a chance to play this too much. I'd played like 2 games with this earlier on, and it did a lot better than I expected. War Elephant being another one that kind of really worked in that people don't really expect it anymore. There was a period where people were playing War Elephant quite a bit, but it feels pretty nice. We have enough soldiers that getting a crew pocket really isn't that difficult. We have the double Redanian archers. All of the spawned volunteers are soldiers. We've got Radovich Royal Guard, Karak Marines, and it just feels relatively easy to get a crew pocket in. And if worst comes to absolute worst, we're running shield wall. We can put shield on units. Anything spawned by Adelia is going to have a shield. So even if you miss the crew pocket, you can still damage your own stuff, and it's kind of fine. So I think this is an interesting one. Again, this is a list that I think there's probably room for a bit of flexibility, few changes. I think the cards that you could look at changing would definitely be the Redanian Archers. Possibly just running one boiling oil would be an option. Dropping down, putting in a 4, and using those extra provisions to beef up. Putting something like an Egmont or like an Anna, something like that. But I think this list did a lot better than I was expecting, to be honest. So yeah, Kamikaze, if you're watching, here you go. Here's a siege list, and I'll probably be doing a video on this soon. So next up, we have scoia'tael. Now, for scoia'tael, I think I'm going to be trying a whole load of stuff, but this is probably what I'm going to be leaning on the most, is back and forge dwarves. I think this list has a lot of potential. You can get a lot of points. There's a lot of points in this list. But the downside is always going to be it just plays so hard into an Erden. I think at the moment, I personally haven't been running into too much in the way of Erden on the ladder. Now, this could obviously change, but provided Erden isn't that prevalent, you're going to be fine with dwarves. There's a whole lot going on here in terms of developing some really huge payoff. So, Bruver is just a massive engine, like a Gesrus that you don't have to wait for. That will be getting you a point per unit on the road every single turn, not just every other, with the movement. And there's a few different ways people have been running dwarves. So a lot of people are running Munro and Zoltan Warrior at the top end, but it felt really bloated at the top end. I was finding it quite difficult to fight in that round one without losing all your power, if that makes sense, because you have some very, very expensive cards that you don't want to spend, so sometimes you're in a bit of a rough patch in round one where you're kind of stuck with these cards that you really don't want to be committing. And also, Munro and Zoltan don't have the biggest payoff considering their provision costs. If you compare them to Bruver, who's just very solid as 11 provisions, like Munro costs more than that, and I don't think you can really value them that highly. So instead, I've kind of gone for a Karathi. We've got a Neuromancy. It's allowed us to run things like a Yarpen. We run Zoltan with Resilience. Run Javier. We've also got a Gaitan, and this is just really another full row payoff card. And the really nice thing about running Gaitan as well is the problem you get with like Barclay and the Mahakam guards is they get their max value when they fill up a row, and once the row's full, you need to either like poorly to get them off the row, something has to die. Gaitan gets your value from the row, moves everything to the other row, so he gets his most value when there's 8 units on a row. You play him as the 9th unit, they all move back, and now there's 8 in the other row, and you can get another full row payoff, which is something you can't get with Mahakam Guard or Barclay. So Gaitan feels really nice in the list, and there's not much in the way of like row locked stuff. The only thing is Javier, but with the way he kind of works, you're going to end up with armor on him. He'll keep boosting as long as he's got armor, but he'll only gain armor when you play a dwarf if he's on the melee row. So by the time you're using a payoff card, Javier's usually got like 4 or 5 armor or something stupid, so it doesn't matter too much. Other cards to note are the Dwarven Chariots. So these were something that I totally underestimated, but they feel really, really nice because you have a lot of armor synergy. So they help to set up units without armor to have armor for Bruver. They can just be a 1 point a turn onto something like a Yarpen. So Yarpen will convert all armor to points, which is really, really nice. If armor gets knocked off anything, you can just set it right up. It means that damage is really mitigated. You can defend your figures a lot better. If you're in a matchup where the only means of getting through a defender is damage, you can chuck more armor onto him. You have a single Dwarf Berserker, that's just a straight 1 point a turn engine that needs the armor, so you can give that armor. Pyrotechs, you can give them armor. I mean, I think my point's proven at this point. There's just so much in that way, and it's a deck I really enjoy playing, and it's pretty brainless. You don't really have to think too much when you play this one. It's pretty fun to play, and got to do it for my Hacken boys. Got to do it for my Hacken. So for Skellige, we have this absolute mess. This is still very, very much in development. I would really encourage you to take the ideas that are going on with this list and try it yourself and see if you can kind of figure out some of the issues, because there are issues. There's a lot of issues with this list, but it's getting there. It's getting there. It's kind of work in progress for me. So this started its life as a tender little dagger deck, looking to develop, dagger onto the board, damage stuff. Dagger gets really tall. Worst comes to worst, in matchups where you can't be confident that dagger's going to stick on the board, you can play him as a finisher with your leader ability. So dagger comes down to 4. Leader deals 8 that ignores armor. Dagger will get boosted by 8 up to a 12. And job's a good one, basically. Now, what then happened was I wanted to run the Pirates package, so we did that. Chucked the Pirates package in, and it still just wasn't feeling quite right, so then I threw in an Arnagard, and that also just felt weird but really good, because we were already running a Sucrus in the list, because it just pairs up really nicely with what Pirates are trying to do. You can use it with, Covenant of Steel, and now you've got a defender that can't die to damage. Only a Purify or Hard Removal will deal with Covenant of Steel, which for some decks is basically game over. So against Crimes, for example, if they've already used their Philippa and they're not running a Heat Wave, or if they've used the Heat Wave, Covenant is completely unkillable to them. There is nothing they can do about it, and a lot of their cards will literally play for 0. So it can literally win some matchups just to use Sucrus to make Covenant not take any damage. And having a unkillable defender is really nice if you want to get a dagger to stick. So that was the general idea there. We obviously have Crack and Holger and all the really good pirate cards. I think I've been pleasantly surprised with the bronze pirate cards. They felt a lot better than I was expecting. And yeah, it's a whole mess. It's a whole mess. Someone fix this list for me. There's a whole lot going on, but it's doing better than I expected for sure, and it's definitely fun. The one weird card in there is probably the Trophy Catch. Probably a little bit of a meme. If you've never played it or played against it, don't know what it does. It's a raid card that will move a unit to the other row and then damage it by how many units are in that row. And really, this was just there because it's a 4 provision, super flexible tech card that you can simply use as a bit of a row move, because we really don't have much in the way of dealing with row locked units. And because it's a raid, then Babylon can get hold of it and jobs a good one. But it's definitely fun. If nothing else, it's less fun. I can't guarantee you wins, but I can guarantee it's definitely enjoyable. And the 1 in a million games where you get dagger up to 40 or 50 points is all worth it for that. The melee you drop 100 MMR. Getting that 50-point dagger makes it all worth it. So following the trend of decks that are 90% of the way there and just need a little bit of tweaking, we finish off with a Collusion Crimes list. So when I was playing Crimes, because I'm a little meta hound and I needed the MMR, I was kind of thinking about what could be done with it, because the list is very, very good, but I don't think it's a solved list. I don't think we have the most optimal version quite yet. And I've been trying out Collusion in it, and that's been quite surprising. I feel like Collusion really works in the list. So to kind of include this, we haven't really dropped a whole lot. this more or less replaced Siggy, and there was only very minor changes I had to make this like very, very consistent. So if you don't know what collusion does, I'll list off now all of the things that are going on in it. It's the longest card text. So you need cards of different crime categories on the board. So if you have a blind eyes, all the others effects will be increased by 1. Crown splitters boost an allied unit with the lowest power by 4. Cut-ups will damage the unit with the highest power, highest enemy unit with the highest power by 4. And Fire Sworn will spawn you 2 zealots. And Tide Clerks will give you 4 coins. So, it's a lot going on. So the sort of potential there is if you get all of those possible ones on the board, it will be playing for 5, 10, 15, 21, 22. So you'll gain 6 coins and it'll play for 16 points. And it's unrealistic to expect that every time you play Collusion. But if you consider the usual kind of situation when you're playing the crimes list, you'll have because Jacques also spawns the zealots. You know, you get 3 Fire Sworns, so even if they kill you Jacques, the tokens will stick, and you'll have your Fire Sworn for the 2 zealots, so that's your 4 points. Tide Clerks usually want to have a Sea Jackal down, it's a really good spender, so that can gain you 4 coins right there. Crown Splitters, I mean, I don't think there's any game with the crimes list where you're not going to have a Crown Splitter on the board, so that's pretty much an automatic one. And Cut-ups is one of the more difficult ones to get to stick. Now we are running a Bloody Good Friends, which would be our cut-ups, and I've really used it as a kind of, the Crown Splitters and Fire Sworn are like automatic, they're going to happen 99% of the time. Tide Clerks most of the time, and Cut-ups and Blind Eyes are like our best case. So we have a single Street Urchins, so that in the matchups where we want to get max value from Collusion, we can just, you know, hold on to the Street Urchins, use it then. And Bloody Good Friends are pretty nice because they actually have 2 crime tags. They're the only card that has that. So they're a Cut-ups and a Crown Splitters, so it fits pretty nice. And it can be tutored off of a Novigrad Injustice because it's Crown Splitters. And yeah, it plays much like the crime list would, but Collusion is kind of that card they're not expecting. And because there's some of the cards, like the Fire Swan tokens, and like Street Urchins that's kind of buffed up and there's more important spenders, and like a Bloody Good Friends that on the surface doesn't really seem like too much, most of the time they're not really going to be targeted by removal. So a lot of the time this Collusion can go off quite well because your opponent's simply not expecting it. And it's worked pretty nicely. I can't tell if it's better than the sort of typical crimes list, but I definitely found it more fun. You know, like you're playing towards Collusion and just knowing your opponent's not going to be expecting it. It's priceless. It's priceless when you can get a full value Collusion off. So yeah, give this one a try. If you're bored of just normal crimes, spice it up with a little Collusion. Just a little Collusion as a little bit of a finish on top. And that's it. That's it for the lists for this season. What typically kind of happens with my channel is I would imagine that at some point this month, usually in the next couple of weeks, I'll do a video on each of these lists, and I'll make sure to link them in the description. So if you're watching this like a week or 2 weeks after it's published, just check the description. There's probably a video using one of these decks if you're interested in it and want to figure out at least how I think it should be played. The Vampires list, for example, I've already used, so the guide will be in there. And then we just pray that I'm not an idiot and that these lists work. And if there are any changes, I will sort of explain them in the video, say this is the list from 6 Faction 6 decks, but I've made these changes and the reason is blah 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 blah, and all that fun stuff. So if you got to this point, I'm Really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video on Thursday.